Sir Bob Kerslake, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
I imagine it's changed somewhat since you graduated.
Absolutely, yes. Quite extraordinary, really. Gone from strength to strength, I think the university has. That means for me, as somebody who came so many years ago, 1987 graduation, it's unrecognisable in many respects. There are one or two buildings that look the same, but so much has changed and so much has developed. It's absolutely fantastic.
And you were a maths student?
I was a maths student. I started doing physics, in fact, but in the first year of doing physics, I moved over to do maths, pure maths.
It's quite a journey from graduating from maths at Warwick to heading the UK civil service. How did you get from there to here?
Well, it's quite an interesting journey, as you say. I had quite an interest in political activity in the university, in fact, and subsequent to that, I thought, well, where did I want to go? I thought public service seemed to be the right place, and I was very interested in local public service. So when a job came up for the Greater London Council, they were recruiting financial managers, as they called them then, I thought that sounded interesting. So with the maths background and all of that, I went off and trained as a public sector accountant with the Greater London Council. First of all, working for someone called Horace Cutler, who at that time was one of the most right-wing leaders in the country, and he was succeeded by a man who you will have heard of, Ken Livingstone,
Yes.
who was on the other side of the spectrum. So it was a very interesting and exciting time.
So you're here today to talk about local growth and cities.
Yes.
That's an interesting question because the Midlands and Coventry in particular suffer from a high rate of unemployment. Urban development is a real problem. What are the challenges which face cities today?
Well, it's right to say it's an interesting and indeed important question, because in the end, growth happens in places, and all the statistics will tell you growth happens predominantly in cities. Now, it's fair to say that the West Midlands have suffered quite considerably, and indeed weren't perhaps making the progress they could have done before the credit crunch. So the challenge here is, how do you create a place that people will choose to locate to? The central thesis I'm making is that local economic growth is essentially about locational choices, whether it's business, whether it's people, whether it's developers. And really the challenge for places like Coventry and Birmingham are, how do they create competitiveness, make them the places that people will choose rather than somewhere else. And that, of course, goes to things like infrastructure, it goes to skills, goes to history, if you like. What are the economic forces that have shaped the area? But in my view, crucially, it goes to strong local leadership, both by the public sector, local authorities, and by the private sector. This is the key to the future well-being of these areas.
Well, you're not a stereotypical Whitehall Mandarin.
I'm not.
How did your time at Sheffield City Council inform the leadership which you operate today?
I think it was absolutely formative. I was there for over 10 years. It was a city that was in really very severe difficulties at the time I went, not just in terms of the city, but the council. It had a huge impact, visited on it from the loss of steel jobs, and was struggling really to come to terms with the kind of place it needed to be. And what I learned, I think, was that you make progress if you can have a very powerful partnership between the political sphere, if you like, the local authority, the political leadership, the business leadership, and indeed the community leadership, community and voluntary organisations. And if you can get those three things aligned, and you can get support from government for what you're trying to do, then it's possible to make kind of quite rapid progress. So the thing I learned really was the power of local leadership, and most importantly, the ability, if you like, for places to make their own decisions. So the importance of devolving power from what is a very centralised country to local places.
At times in the last couple of years, localism has seemed fairly high up on the government's agenda. Do you think it's something they should be pursuing with more vigour, or have they got that base covered?
I think it is still an important part of government policy. I think there's been a lot that's already been done to shift power away from Whitehall to people and communities. And in the agenda of local economic growth, I think there's some really powerful examples of that. And the thing I'm currently focused on is city deals. The idea of creating a deal city by city where central governments say we'll give you support and we'll relax certain controls and restraints, if you like, and local places say in return we'll commit to stronger leadership and a drive for growth. And so there's examples, I think, now where we're making progress and can continue to. I think it's an agenda that doesn't ever stop, really. We've got a long way to go before we get to the kind of devolved local leadership that I think perhaps we need to be really successful.
And we've spoken a lot so far about local governments. There have been a lot of questions, a lot of political pressure put upon the central bureaucracy in the past couple of months. And I was wondering how you see the future of the the Whitehall Civil Service. Will it be able to withstand the challenges and the change that the 21st century will bring?
Well, I think the starting point is to say there's challenges at every level, in every part of the public sector. I don't think civil servants in some sense are uniquely under pressure at the moment. You know, we have some huge challenges for this country of getting growth, tackling the deficit and so on. So in that sense, we're one part of a challenge. I think our particular test though, is how do we ensure that we change what we do, hang on to what we're good at, certainly, but change what we do to match the needs of the country now and the needs of the government now. And I think we should be quite open to the fact that more change is needed, that we've got some strengths, but we aren't where we entirely need to be in terms of some of the areas. So I think those challenges can be managed. I think the civil service will be smaller, it will be a quarter smaller between the beginning and the end of this Parliament, but I think it can be stronger as well. But we've got to be very clear about where the priorities are for improvement.
And to wrap up then, on a national scale, on a local scale, on a regional scale, what would you say is the single greatest challenge to the growth of cities, and in particular the development of cities which suffer from high unemployment, like Coventry?
The biggest challenge they face, if you like, is to change their underlying economic drivers. We're all the kind of prisoners of our history, and no more so than for cities. Pretty much every city has to transform, reinvent itself, if you like, to survive in the future economy that we face. And that some of those will do that well and some will struggle. And the big job, therefore, is to have visionary leadership that knows how each city is going to perform well, how their city is going to perform well, and then undertake that journey, sometimes painful, sometimes difficult, but necessary journey to be successful economies in the new world.
Sir Bob, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.